What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and you're watching our college football channel. We continue with our 2023 schedule preview and projected record series. The Baylor Bears are up next, coming off of a bit of a disappointing season. They were 6-7 last year, a team that a lot of people expected to maybe make it to the Big 12 championship. I think Oklahoma versus Baylor was a very popular preseason pick. Also, Oklahoma State, I think, was in there. Maybe Texas. But of course, it wound up being TCU and Kansas State. No one really saw that one coming. But this is a pretty young team. I think people, and including me, didn't realize that they had some roster turnover from a really good 2021 team. But this is a young team that I think has a chance to be pretty good this year. Now with another year of experience, and we'll see what this schedule looks like for them. They open up with Texas State on September 2nd. That will be the season opener. Then they've got a big-time non-conference matchup with Utah on September 9th. Again, shout out to Utah for playing Baylor and Florida in the same season. That'll be a home game for Baylor. That'll be a big one. It'll be tough. Utah going to be probably favored in that one, but I think playing at home, Baylor's got a shot. Then they play LIU, Long Island University, on September 16th, so you got a pretty easy win there. And then on September 23rd, they'll play Texas at home. They don't play Oklahoma this year, so that means no more. We won't see that matchup again with Texas and Oklahoma leaving for the SEC. We'll get Baylor versus Texas for the last time in the Big 12. They'll play UCF on the road on September 30th, as they will play the newcomers there. And then on October 7th, they play Texas Tech at home. Then they get a bye week, so their bye week comes right in the middle of the season. Pretty good place for it, before a road game at Cincinnati, which will be a pretty tough game. So I think they've got, a good spot for their bye week there between Texas Tech and Cincinnati. But on October 21st, they will play Cincinnati on the road. Then they play Iowa State on the 28th. This is another team that was really young last year and I think has a chance to be improved this season. Then on November 4th, they'll play Houston at home. Follow that up with back-to-back road games against the two teams that were in the Big 12 championship last year with Kansas State and TCU. That's really tough there. Although, I don't think TCU is going to be quite as good as they were last year. Kansas State, maybe not quite as good, but both of these teams should be good teams again. And then they'll close things out with a home game against West Virginia on November 25th. So that's the schedule for Baylor. You look at teams that they don't play as far as the newcomers. BYU, the only team they don't play. They will play Cincinnati, UCF, and also Houston. Which that, it kind of makes sense because, of course, they just played BYU in the non-conference. So I think that's a pretty good draw there. They only have 4 road games: UCF, Cincinnati, Kansas State, and TCU. So 5 conference games at home, plus all their non-conference games are at home. That bodes well for them. Again, Utah, really tough non-conference game. Then you look at who they don't play as far as the old Big 12 teams. They don't play Oklahoma. They don't play Oklahoma State. And they don't play Kansas. So, a pretty fair draw as far as who they don't play from the original Big 12 team. So all in all, this schedule, it's not that bad. The games are separated pretty well, except for Kansas State and TCU back-to-back. That is obviously a tough back-to-back there. But other than that, again, this schedule is not horrible. Utah going to be a very tough non-conference game. But let's see what the projection looks like. Again, this is the scale that we use. If it's a 50-50 game, it'll be in the white. That means this is a game I think the spread will be less than a touchdown. Under 20, over 80. Those are games where I think the spread will be 20 or more. 20 to 29, 71 to 80. Those are games where I think the spread will be double digits, 10 to 19 points. 30 to 39, 61 to 70. Those are games where I think the spread will be about a touchdown, 6, 7, 8 points, kind of in that range. So let's get to it here for Baylor. Couple of easy wins. Texas State, LIU, I think those are easy wins. LIU is probably closer to 99%. Texas State, maybe closer to 90 to 95% if we really had to put a number on it. But they should be favored by 20 plus in both of these games. Should be pretty easy wins. And if you kind of get those games out of the way, then you really narrow down these other 10 games. And the rest of the schedule, there are no gimmies, no easy wins. Iowa State, Houston, West Virginia. I'm going to put these in the purple. I think Baylor will be favored by about a touchdown. They're all at home. They're all teams that were fairly similar to Baylor last year. I do think they'll be a little better than these 3 teams. And again, the fact that they play them at home is big. And so you would expect Baylor to be favored. Not necessarily going to win all 3 of these games, of course, but they should be favored at least in these 3 games. Again, these will be tough, hard-fought games more than likely, but I think Baylor will be favored by 6, 7, 8 points in all 3 of these matchups. I think then you've got games where they'll be about a touchdown underdog, Utah, Texas, and then those 2 road games, Kansas State and TCU. These are going to be the toughest games on the schedule here for Baylor. 4 games where I think they will clearly be the underdogs. Not saying they have no chance. Utah and Texas are both at home. You never know. Kansas State and TCU, like I said, maybe not quite as good as they were last year, so maybe Baylor has a chance. But, putting these in the yellow is really pushing it. I think the spread in these games will be 9 or 10, could be maybe in the orange. But when we do these projections, if it's close, I'm always going to go on the side of more conservative. So we're going with a more conservative call on these games, and we're putting them in the yellow. But again, Baylor will be clear underdogs in all 4 of these matchups. And then that leaves UCF, Texas Tech, and Cincinnati right there kind of in the middle of the season. These are the toss-ups. These are the 50-50 games. Home field advantage might be the difference as far as who's favored. Maybe they're a field goal underdog against UCF and Cincinnati, a field goal favorite against Texas Tech. But I think it's a very small number, and I think all 3 of these games could really go either way. So if they do lose to Utah and Texas and they start the season off 2-2, these 3 games really going to set the tone for the rest of the season for Baylor. If they can find a way to win all 3 of them, they're going to be in a really good spot. They would be sitting there at 5-2, and again, probably favored against Iowa State and Houston, a chance to really build some momentum before playing Kansas State and TCU there towards the end of the season. But if they lose a couple of these games, and then all of a sudden they're sitting there at 3-4 potentially, and then Iowa State and Houston, those are games where they could potentially slip up. You could see how this season could be very similar to last season for Baylor. So that's really, I think, where it's going to be determined. UCF, Texas Tech, and Cincinnati, they really need to win at least 2 of those 3 games to give them a chance to maybe be in that conversation in the Big 12 at the end of the season. You lose 2 or even 3 of those games, it's over. It's pretty much over at that point because, and again, that's assuming they do lose to Texas. But again, they'll have a chance in that game. And then Utah non-conference, so that's not really going to factor in. But that's really where I think the season, that's the make or break part of the season right there. Those 3 50-50 games all in a row. So for the projection, it comes out to 7-5. So a pretty good projection here for this Baylor team. A little bit better than last year. And basically the way it breaks down, you've got 3 50-50 games. You've got 4 games where there'll be a slight underdog, 3 games where there'll be a slight favorite. And then you have 2 games counted as wins in Texas State and LIU. So the way it breaks down, you basically just split those other games. So you go 5-5 in those other 10 games. Then you add the 2 wins with Texas State and LIU, and that's how you get to 7-5. Closer to 6-6 than 8-4, but 7-5. That is the projected record for Baylor in 2023.